I want to start this deep dive by asking you to do something a little different. Just close your eyes for a second. I want you to picture a photograph. It's the kind of image you'd see on a travel brochure or maybe the default screensaver on a, really expensive laptop. We are talking about a pristine tropical beach. Golden hour is hitting that warm, syrupy light that makes everything look better. The water is turquoise, completely flat, just lapping at the shore. And resting on the white sand are these beautiful, colorful wooden fishing boats. They aren't doing anything. They're just sitting there, framed by palm trees. It looks perfect.
It's the universal image of peace, isn't it? It's the finish line. It's where everyone is trying to get to for retirement.
Exactly. It looks like paradise. It looks like a place to rest. But today, we are diving into a source that takes that specific image, that desire to park your boat on the warm sand, and essentially argues that it might be the most dangerous place you can be.
Dangerous spiritually, specifically.
Right. We are looking at a very challenging set of discussion guides and leadership exercises from a book titled Sent Beyond Comfort Until Every Nation Rejoices.
Yeah.
And the core premise is, well, it's going to ruin that beach photo for you. The source argues that keeping the boat on the sand, staying in a posture of comfort and safety, isn't just a personal preference. It calls it an act of disobedience.
It's a heavy claim, and I think we need to set the stage here because this isn't just a theological lecture or, a dusty textbook. The material we have is actually a workbook. It's full of audits, checklists, and what it called intentionally unsettling questions. It's designed for leaders who suspect they might have drifted into cruise control and don't even know it.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking a framework that challenges the modern, Western definition of success. It's aimed at Christian mission work, obviously. But honestly, as I was reading this, I kept thinking, if you are leading any kind of organization and you feel like you're prioritizing safety over purpose, this is going to hit home.
It absolutely applies broadly. And it all pivots around one central question found early in the guide. At what point does comfort transition from being a blessing to being disobedience?
That is a sharp distinction. Because usually we think of comfort as a reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
You work hard, you grind, and the reward is that you get to be comfortable. You get the nice office, the stability, the boat on the beach.
Precisely. That is the cultural narrative. But the source material suggests that in a missional context, when you have a job to do that involves others, comfort can become a narcotic. It numbs you to the actual job description. It suggests that comfort creates a fog where you can no longer see the needs of the world. So to understand why this is so critical, we have to start with the diagnosis. The guide opens with a heavy theological reframe in Chapter 1 about how we view God.
This was interesting to me because it moves mission out of the to-do list. Usually mission is something you do.
Right. The classic mistake the guide points out is that organizations, specifically churches, but nonprofits too, tend to view mission as a department. You have the youth department, the music department, the HR department, and the missions department. It's a program you run, usually with a committee that meets in the basement on Tuesday nights.
It's a line item in the budget. It's a slice of the pie.
Exactly. But the source argues that mission isn't something God does, like a side hobby or a pet project. It is who he is. The text uses the phrase, the God who sends. It argues that sending is a divine attribute, just like holiness or love or justice.
So let me play devil's advocate here. Isn't that just semantics? I mean, does it really matter if we call it a department or an attribute, as long as the work gets done?
The source argues it matters immensely because of the downstream effects. If mission is a department, you can cut it when the budget gets tight. You can opt out of it if you weren't interested in that department. But if sending is who God is and an organization claims to represent him, then sending can't be a side project. It has to be the operating system. It has to be the heartbeat of the entire body.
So you can't outsource it to the committee in the
basement, right. The guide asks a really piercing question here. In what ways have you unconsciously treated mission as a church department rather than a divine attribute? It forces you to look at your organizational chart and realize you might have compartmentalized the very thing you exist to do.
That's a good theoretical setup, but the guide moves pretty quickly into the practical. And this is where I think listeners might squirm a little. I know I did. Let's talk about the comfort audit.
Yeah, this is from Chapter 2. This is designed to disrupt institutional inertia. We all have it. We keep doing things because, well, that's how we've always done them. The comfort audit asks you to take a piece of paper and list 5 specific areas of comfort that you or your organization are currently protecting.
Give me some examples here. What counts as protecting comfort? Are we talking about buying expensive coffee?
It could be, but it goes deeper. The guide suggests categories like financial comfort, relational comfort, or positional comfort. So financial comfort might look like hoarding reserves. You have a massive savings account because you're afraid of a rainy day rather than spending that money on the mission now.
Okay, so hoarding resources for safety.
Right. But positional comfort is the one that really stings for leaders. That's protecting your reputation. It's avoiding controversial moves because you don't want to lose status or you don't want donors to be angry at you. You are comfortable in your current standing, so you don't rock the boat.
So you're literally writing down, I am protecting my reputation, or we are protecting our savings account. That's brutal honesty.
It is. And then comes the kicker. You have to answer, how might this comfort limit obedience? And even harder, what would obedience cost us this year if comfort were no longer the priority?
That feels incredibly risky. Because, again, pushing back a bit, isn't there a role for prudence? You don't want to just be reckless with an organization's future. You can't just burn the money and alienate everyone.
That's the most common objection, and the source anticipates that. It distinguishes between wisdom and unconscious passivity. It argues that we often disguise our desire for safety as wisdom. We say, oh, we're just being good stewards or we're being prudent, when actually we're just scared of the waves. We are staying on the beach with the boats because it's safe, not because it's the right strategic move.
But it's asking us to check our motives. Is it wisdom, or is it fear wearing a wisdom costume?
Exactly.
Speaking of the waves, let's talk about where the boat is supposed to go. There's a distinction in the source material that I think is critical. I'll be honest, before reading this, I thought mission just meant helping people or sharing your faith. But Chapter 5 draws a hard line between the lost and the unreached.
Yeah.
And for the layperson, those sound like synonyms.
They do sound similar, but in the technical world of missiology, they are night and day. And understanding this is key to the whole argument. Lost individuals, in the context of this book, are people who don't believe, but they have access. These are your neighbors, your colleagues, the guy at the coffee shop. They could walk into a church on Sunday if they wanted to. They could download a Bible app in their language right now.
Okay, so the barrier isn't physical access. They are close to the message, they just haven't accepted it.
Right. They are reached with access, but lost in response. Unreached peoples, however often called UPGs in the data, are defined by a lack of access. These are ethno-linguistic groups with no indigenous church, no Bible in their language, and no believers nearby to tell them.
So it's not just that they don't believe, it's that they literally can't hear the message because it doesn't exist in their context.
Exactly. It's an access issue. And the source uses the phrase moral urgency here. It argues that while both groups matter, obviously you care about your neighbor, Scripture places a unique moral urgency on the places where zero access exists. It references Romans 15, where Paul explicitly says his ambition is to preach where Christ has not been named. He's not interested in building on someone else's foundation.
The argument is that if we only focus on the lost, the people right around us who look like us and speak our language, we might unintentionally ignore the unreached entirely.
It's the path of least resistance. It's easier to talk to a neighbor than to someone in a remote village with a different alphabet and, a hostile government.
To help visualize this, the guide suggests an exercise called mapping proximity in Chapter 3. I actually tried to do this mentally while reading, and it was a bit convicting.
It's a great visual tool. It asks you to draw a map of your daily life. Your commute, your grocery store, your gym, your school run. Who do you encounter regularly? And more importantly, who is completely absent from those circles?
It asks you to identify specific boundaries you haven't crossed. Cultural boundaries, linguistic boundaries, socioeconomic boundaries.
It's about confronting the segregation of your life. We naturally drift toward people like us. It's sociologically normal, but missiologically fatal. There's a quote in the source that really stuck with me. How does ignorance, intentional or unintentional, function as moral insulation?
That's a heavy phrase. Moral insulation. Unpack that for us.
It means that if I structure my life so I never see the need, I never have to feel the guilt of not helping. Ignorance keeps me warm. It keeps me comfortable. If I don't see the unreached, I don't have to care about them. I can stay in my boat on the sand and feel like a good person because I was nice to the other people on the beach.
So the map proves that our isolation is often by design. We designed our lives to not see the hard stuff.
Right. And the exercise demands that you initiate one act of presence among a previously distant group within 7 days. It forces you to physically cross the line you drew on the map.
But crossing that line,
Yes.
that brings us to the cost. We can't talk about this without talking about the downside. If you leave the beach, you hit the waves. Segment 3 of the source material is where the rubber meets the road. It's titled A Cruciform Mission.
This is chapter 6. And for anyone not familiar with the theological jargon, cruciform just means cross-shaped. It's the idea that the mission should look like the life of Jesus, which involved suffering, rejection, and sacrifice, not just winning and popularity.
This section seems to fight directly against almost every modern leadership book I've ever seen.
It really does. Think about it. Modern leadership is about success, growth, optimization, safety, scale. If you are suffering or losing money or getting criticized, the modern assumption is that you are failing. Something is wrong with your strategy. You need a consultant.
But this source argues the opposite.
It argues that the biblical model treats suffering as formation. It's part of the process. It references John 12:24, the grain of wheat falling to the ground and dying to produce fruit. You can't have the fruit without the dying.
That's a tough sell in a boardroom. Hey guys, our goal for Q3 is to fall to the ground and die. I don't see that going over well.
It's a terrible pitch for Wall Street, but it's the reality of this specific mission. To make this personal, the guide includes an exercise called Naming the Fear. Leaders are asked to write down exactly what they're afraid of losing if they embrace this cruciform way.
What usually comes up in that exercise?
Loss of security is obvious, but loss of relevance is a huge one, especially today. We live in an influencer culture. Leaders want a platform. They want to be heard. They want the podcast downloads.
I relate to that. You want your work to matter. You want an audience.
Of course. But the source attacks that platform-based ministry culture. It asks, how does hidden faithfulness contradict platform-based ministry culture? It challenges the idea that bigger is always better. Sometimes the work requires you to be invisible, obscure, and forgotten.
It sets up this tension between efficiency and faithfulness. We are obsessed with efficiency.
Right.
We want quick results, ROI.
Right. And the source counters with long obedience. One of the discussion questions is, why do we often expect visible fruit quickly when Scripture emphasizes long obedience? If you were working with an unreached people group, you might go 10 years without a single success story to put in your newsletter. Does that mean you failed? The source says no.
That brings us back to the boat metaphor. A boat on the sand is efficient. It doesn't use gas. It doesn't get scratched. It doesn't need repairs.
But it's useless. It's a decorative object, not a vessel.
Right. It's useless.
Yeah.
And that's the pivot point. The source says we need to move from gathering, keeping the boats together on the beach, to crossing boundaries. But here's the thing. You can't just wish that into existence. You need a structure that supports it.
Yeah.
You can't take a rowboat into a hurricane.
Which leads us to segment 4, systems, budgets, and metrics. This is the nerdy part. I love this part. But the source argues it's actually the spiritual part. There's a phrase here, inspiration fails where structure is absent.
That feels true. How many times have we been inspired by a talk and then Monday morning hits and nothing changes?
Exactly.
Okay.
That is a crucial insight from chapter 9. You can preach the most inspiring sermon, you can have a deep dive that gets everyone fired up, but if your systems, your budget, your calendar, your training pipeline don't change, the mission will fail, the inertia will win.
They call it a missional systems audit, basically checking if your systems are sustaining obedience or quietly sabotaging it.
Quiet sabotage is the perfect term. Let's look at metrics from chapter 8. How do most organizations measure success?
Numbers.
Yeah.
Attendance. How many people showed up? How many people stayed? How full is the parking lot?
Right. Retention, seating capacity. The source wants to shift that entirely to release.
Explain that. Release.
It asks, how many people were sent out? How many leaders did we give away? How many resources did we export to the places that have nothing?
That seems completely counterintuitive for an organization that wants to survive. You usually want to keep your best people. You don't want to train a superstar leader and then say, great, now go move to another continent. That hurts the home team.
And the source acknowledges that pain. It says releasing your best people is terrifying. It asks, what fears surface when your best people are sent away? But it argues that for the Great Commission, this specific goal of reaching the nations, you cannot succeed if everyone stays at headquarters. You have to hemorrhage your best talent for the sake of the mission.
Then there's the money. You can't talk about mission without talking about the budget. The guide has an exercise called Tracing Treasure.
It asks a simple but revealing question. What does your budget say about what you truly treasure? It goes back to that comfort audit. If 98% of the budget is spent on internal comfort buildings, staff for the members, AC, coffee, nice chairs, then our treasure is clearly us.
It also makes a distinction between charity and partnership. I thought this was helpful because a lot of people think, well, I wrote a check, so I'm doing my part.
Yes. This is important. Charity is often writing a check from a distance. It's tipping God in a way. It's low risk. I give the money, I feel good, I move on. But the source argues for shared sacrifice and co-laboring. It asks, how does partnership differ theologically from charity?
What's the answer?
Partnership implies you are equally invested in the outcome. If they fail, you hurt. If they suffer, you feel it. You aren't just a donor, you're a co-worker. You are in the boat with them, metaphorically.
So we've diagnosed the problem, we love comfort, we've looked at the cost, it might hurt, we've audited our systems. Now, for the listener who is thinking, okay, this is convicting, but I have a job, I have a life, what do I actually do tomorrow? Let's look at the practical application.
The source is very strong here. It refuses to let you stay in the realm of theory. It offers a 90-day obedience journey.
What does that look like?
It's a structured reflection. It's not about moving to a remote island tomorrow. It's about building a habit. Every week, you ask yourself 2 questions. Where did I choose comfort this week? And where did I choose obedience? You start by just noticing the difference.
Awareness is step 1. And there are some immediate adjustments suggested in the appendix as well. One that stood out to me was the challenge to rewrite the mission statement.
Yes, but with a specific rule, you can only use verbs of movement.
So no, we exist to be, or we gather to.
No, you have to use words like sending, pursuing, crossing, redeeming. It changes the psychology of the organization. If your mission statement is active, your culture might start to move.
I also like the mental bandwidth audit. We talked about leaders being overwhelmed. I feel this. I have about 50 tabs open in my brain right now.
That's a great tool. It asks you to list the top 10 mental loops running in your head right now. Did I reply to that email? Is the roof leaking? What are we having for dinner? Then it challenges you to offload the non-missional tasks.
Why? Is it just about productivity?
No, it's about capacity. The goal is to free up mental space so you can actually focus on the unreached reality we talked about earlier. You can't care about the nations if you are obsessed with the leaky faucet. You need missional bandwidth.
And finally, there's that challenge to initiate one act of presence within 7 days. Just one step across a boundary.
That's the key. The source emphasizes that mission isn't completed in one giant leap. It says mission is lived through 1,000 faithful steps taken beyond comfort.
As we wrap this up, we have to look at the why. Why do all this? Why suffer? Why give away your best people? Why push the boat into the storm? Because frankly, the beach is really nice, and safety feels safe.
The source ends with the eschatological vision. That's a fancy theological word for keeping the end in view. It points to Revelation 7, the vision of every nation, tribe, people, and language standing before the throne.
So the argument is that our current priorities have to be shaped by that future reality. We are working backwards from the finish line.
Exactly. The source argues that we are living toward that moment. One of the final questions for the listener is, if your church or your organization disappeared tomorrow, what would the unreached lose?
That is a haunting question, because if the answer is nothing, then we have a problem.
It really puts the legacy of success in perspective. The source asks, what legacy of obedience, not success, are you passing forward? It's not about how big your organization became, but how faithful you were to the task of sending.
We started with that image of the boats on the beach. Safe, dry, comfortable. It's a beautiful picture. But the source leaves us with a final challenge that isn't about agreeing with the theology. It's about action.
It is. The text says, the mission of God does not advance through agreement, but through obedience. You can agree with everything we said today and still sit on the sand. The call is to push the boat into the water, to accept the cost, to leave the safety of the shore.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today, directly from the source material. It asks simply, who will go? And perhaps just as importantly for those leading, who will let go of their comfort to ensure someone can go?
It's about realizing that the safety of the beach is an illusion if it keeps you from your true purpose.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope this has unsettled you in the best possible way. Thanks for listening.